It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I had the privilege to interview the business owner of Dorm Room Disruption podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you got started with the Sports Talk podcast?
Yeah, so I love sports. I've fallen in love with sports all my life, but a little bit short to play basketball, not quite the arm strength to be a quarterback. So talking about sports is the next best thing. I came to Bradley University, where I'm going to school right now, to do sports communication. And a friend of mine, we got together and we're like, hey, we were talking sports all the time anyway. We're like, why don't we start a podcast for it? So that's how the whole thing kind of came together.
Can you talk about, of course, like you said that you were in the sports communication. How has that helped you with your podcast?
Oh, it's helped a lot of ways. You get different exposure to different people and methods. So, like, you think you're doing one way of doing things, and then through the Bradley program, they'll teach you another way of doing it, which is kind of nice. And it also helps marketing wise, because they really show you how to get your podcast out there and kind of brand it, because branding is very important in the podcasting world, because there's so many of them. So you got to make yours stand out somehow. With
being a broadcasting student, do you get to also kind of self-promote yourself during classes, be like, hey, go check out my podcast?
You can throw in a couple of shameless plugs every once in a while, but everyone's kind of doing their own thing. So most of our promoting comes through their social media or whatnot.
What do you cover in your sports podcast?
We cover a little bit of everything in the sports world. I'm a big White Sox fan, so I like covering the MLB. We also talk NFL, of course, because that's huge. And NBA are really the three big juggernauts we talk about. But my co-host is a big soccer fan too, so we cover a little bit of that. College football as well. You name it in the sports world, we're probably covering it. But MLB, NBA, and NFL are the three major ones we cover.
When it comes to the NBA, have you talked about the Michael Jordan versus LeBron? Because I see that you have a Michael Jordan jersey in the background. So I was just wondering, have you talked about the conversation between LeBron and Michael Jordan?
Yeah. I feel like it's been a little bit overblown at this point, but especially over the summer when there wasn't a whole lot of sports and The Last Dance came out, that was like the big talking point. I'm actually a big LeBron guy. I really appreciate what he's doing. I think over the course of his career, he'll have a more impressive resume than Jordan. That being said, I think Jordan would beat him one-on-one. But it's always an interesting talking point, and everyone has such strong opinions on it that it's always great. Brings a great discussion whenever it comes up.
Can you talk about how you came up with the name Dorm Room Disruption?
Dorm Room Dispute. But like I said before, me and my buddy were always arguing about sports. We're like, oh, why don't we start a podcast? So we're coming up with names. And one of the sports shows that come to mind is Undisputed on FS1, where they're always arguing. So we're like, hey, we're always arguing in a dorm room dispute. Kind of merge the two together, and that's basically how it came to be.
Who are some of the people that you've looked up to in the podcast industry?
That's a good question. I like Bill Burr's podcast just because his ability to be on there by himself and ramble for like a half hour and still make it interesting. I really respect that. Don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I think that's a great quality to be able to be entertaining, even if you're by yourself without any guests. I'm a big fan of Colin Cowherd's show. So kind of from the sports side, I like him. And then Joe Rogan, obviously, you got to love what he's done with his podcast. And that's kind of like the standard, I guess, of podcasting. So a mix between those three, I suppose.
Can you talk about your segment, Free Money?
Yeah, I would love to. I just started it this year. So I've been pretty good at fantasy football over the course of my life. So I always get a bunch of guys in our fraternity always asking me for fantasy football advice. I'm constantly responding to texts and talking to people. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just make it into a segment all in one so everyone can see it. I guess it helps build the podcast brand. And then also I just turned 21, so can now legally sports bet. And I always put a bunch of research into those picks. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, hey, why don't I spread the wealth? Because I've been pretty successful with it. I think this year, as of right now, we do 3 picks a week, and then we pick 5 fantasy guys. Fantasy players have averaged over 20 points, which has been good. And then the picks were 11 for 18 as of right now. So we're over 60%, which for a professional sports gambler is pretty good. So I'm pretty proud of this segment up to this point. We're hoping to keep the success rolling.
That's wonderful. What are some more of your segments that you have on your podcast?
Well, we've had segments come and go throughout. We did the newest segment we had are they good? So it's about NFL teams, kind of like bubble teams, whether we think they're good or not. We've had who's hot or who's not. I mean, we kind of, depending on what's happening in the sports world, is we'll kind of throw out an idea. Like I remember we won, it was college football bowl games. So it was bowl game or bullshit was the podcast. So we'd name a bowl game or either like a made up name for a bowl game. And he would have to, our co-host would have to guess whether it was an actual bowl game or not. So like there's some crazy ones like the Gasparilla Bad Boy Molars, and like that actually turned out to be a bowl game. So stuff like that. I mean, it all depends. We kind of come up with them on the fly, and they change as the year goes along.
That's very interesting that you came up with that concept. Who are some of the people that you've interviewed in the past?
Most of the people we've had on have just been one of our favorite people from Bradley that are experts. I mean, we had for the hockey playoffs, for example, we brought on a guy who does the Bradley Club hockey broadcasting. He's really big into the NHL, and he's from Minnesota, so hockey's really big up there. So he knows a lot more about us than hockey. So we brought him on to interview him. I had a friend from back home. He's a part owner of the Green Bay Packers because they're a publicly owned company. So we brought him on to talk the NFL draft, mostly just friends of mine that know what they're talking about in a specific field. And that's the type of people we like to bring on. Or if they think they'll be interesting or have a good debate or discussion, we bring them on.
How is it like talking with the owner that was part owner of the Green Bay Packers?
Oh, he's great. I mean, I've known him for a while, so he's always an interesting character. And him and my co-host got into a little bit of a debate over the draft there, so that was always good because both of them have strong opinions. And his name's Patrick Cushman. He's very knowledgeable about the NFL. He's been a season ticket holder for a while too. So, those are the type of guys we want. Guys that are passionate about what they're talking about because it shows in your work if you like what you're talking about, and that are knowledgeable about the subject too. So we don't want anyone on there that's gonna spew hot takes for a hot take's sake. We want it to be like an informed opinion that you know what you're talking about, so people can learn something from it as well as be entertained.
Speaking about learning, what have you learned now that you didn't know before you started?
Definitely the how important the social media side is. I mean, I always knew it was important, but for branding and to really try and grow it, you have to be engaged in social media and really do a good job of promoting it and getting it out there to as many people as possible. That's definitely been the biggest learning experience, I guess you could say, for the podcast.
What are some of your future plans for the dorm room disruption?
Dorm room dispute, but yeah,
dorm room dispute.
Don't worry about it. Well, we definitely want to continue the free money segment. We might be adding a new host that Patrick Cushman we were talking about earlier might be coming on to join us later this year, is adding another host. But just continue on the track we're on. We just joined the Unhinged Sports Network, which we're very excited about. So keep trying to grow the brand, I guess, and keep the train rolling.
Can you talk more about growing the brand with the new thing that the new network that you're on now?
Yeah, so they're pretty cool because they kind of run their network like a radio station. We actually just debuted tonight on their show at 6:00. So they'll have a lineup of podcasts, and at the certain times of the day, whenever you tune in, they'll be playing. And they kind of rotate 24/7. So you can tune in at any time and there'll be a podcast from their playing. It's kind of like a radio station. So that's kind of cool. It's going to reach bigger audience, and they got listeners everywhere across the United States and in Canada. So we're very excited about being a new addition to their team over there.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
What advice would you give upcoming sports podcasts that are looking to get started?
My biggest advice would be, because there's so many podcasts out there, you really got to make yourself stand out. And how you do that is you got to find your niche and what you love talking about and what you're passionate about talking about. So, because if you're passionate about it and you enjoy doing it, it's going to show in your work. And if you're excited, the listener's going to be excited. Because if you're just going out there half-assing stuff, you're not actually interested in it, then if you're not interested, why should the listener be interested? So find the topic that you're into, I guess your lane or what you're really good at, and that's gonna show. And you gotta kind of blend being entertaining and knowledgeable too, especially in the sports talk world, because there's so many different sports talk podcasts out there that that's one of the main things to help you set yourself apart. But yeah, find a passion for what you're doing and find your niche. Probably be my biggest advice.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find your podcast, Dorm Room Dispute, at?
So we're on Spotify. If you search Dorm Room Dispute on Spotify, we'll be on there. We also have a YouTube channel where if you just want to watch certain segments or kind of get a feel for what we do, we're on Dorm Room Dispute on YouTube. That's our channel there. If you follow us on Twitter, we put all of our links up at Dorm Room Dispute. And the Unhinged Network too. If you tune in every Wednesday at 6, our new episodes will be on there as well.
Thank you again for your interview and best of luck in your sports podcast, Dorm Room Dispute.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for your interview and best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.